The history of Mecca. Did Mecca exist during Abraham's time? This is Daniel Amari from the Religion Research Institute. This episode is based on Dr. Rafat Amari's book, Islam in Light of History. Last episode, we discussed the archaeological data of other nations. We found out that in Arabia, despite the fact some of the nations existed for a very small period of time, whether 200 years or 300 years, and despite the fact that some of them existed a long time ago or very recent, whether they are in the north or the south, there is extensive archaeological record for them. And that extensive archaeological record contains a list of kings and queens and rulers, and information about their gods, information about their lives, their names. And despite all of this, we find nothing from Mecca. And this is very surprising, because the Islamic claim state that Mecca was already in existence from 2000 BC all the way to the 7th century AD. Mecca was supposed to be, according to the Islamic claim, the center of Arabia, of religion and trade, and yet we find nothing, no archaeology for it, from 2000 BC till the 4th century AD. So for 2,400 years, 2,500 years, Mecca is absent archaeologically. Yet we find archaeology for cities and nations in northern Arabia and southern Arabia, north of Mecca and south of Mecca. Now we will continue with our studies with southern Arabia and Saba and Himyar. For Saba and Himyar, present series of 102 kings from 9th century BC all the way to the 6th century AD, 102 kings. The claim that a central religious city like Mecca could have been present without any records to support it is implausible and unacceptable, especially when we start to compare it with archaeology of Saba and Himyar, where they have more rain than Mecca, and Mecca has less rain, and so supposedly we were supposed to find more archaeology for Mecca, but the truth of the matter, we find tons of archaeology for Saba and Himyar from the 9th century BC to the 6th century AD, list of 102 kings, very few gaps. Yet we find nothing for Mecca from 2000 BC to the 4th century AD. We leave northern Arabia and southern Arabia and we go to east of Mecca and we look at the kingdom of Kinda. The capital of Kinda is Dhu-Kahilum. First king was Rabi'a, 3rd century AD. He was mentioned by Sabaean inscriptions. We move to the eastern Arabia, kingdom of Dilmun. Flourished since 3000 BC to the 7th century AD. Sumerian and Akkadian inscriptions mention Dilmun in the 4th and the 3rd millennium BC. Archaeological inscriptions tell about the line of Dilmun kings and the history of Dilmun. Attestation from Assyrians, Babylonians, Greek, and Persians. Yet, despite the fact that Kingdom of Dilmun existed from 3000 BC till the 7th century AD, and we don't see anything from Mecca. Yet Mecca supposedly was in existence since 2000 BC. Eastern Arabian Kingdom of Magan, present location Oman. Internal and external inscriptions about Magan as far as 2800 BC. Some of these inscriptions show us names of kings contemporaries to the biblical patriarchs. This is very significant and very, very important. Why? Because when we look at Mecca, we look at the nations and the cities north of Mecca, south of Mecca, east of Mecca. We look at the east coast of Arabia. We find nations. We find small nations, large nations, nations that existed as far as 3000 BC, older than Mecca, or older than the claims of Muslims about Mecca. And yet all of them have records, and all of them document their line of kings, and we have a lot of data about their names, about their gods, and some of them have complete internal and external record. Yet, we find nothing from Mecca from 2000 BC till the 4th century AD. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing internal, nothing external. Now we come to Epic of Gilgamesh, around 2000 BC. The Epic of Gilgamesh is very important because it portrays Central Arabia as the land of darkness guarded by mythical scorpions like men. Extremely dangerous. No one crossed from eternity except one person called Shamash. Why the Epic of Gilgamesh is very important? Because it is around 2000 BC. This is about Abraham's time. And the Islamic claim state that Abraham went with Ishmael to Mecca and they built the temple of Kaaba, and the city of Mecca was already in existence and dwelt one of the most significant tribes. Yet the Epic of Gilgamesh around that time reports to us that this area, the area of Mecca, was uninhabited land, very dangerous. No one crossed to it at all. Now we come to another important aspect of archaeology. Our first argument about archaeology discussed the fact that all of these nations, whether in the south or in the north or the east or in the or far east of Mecca, they have records. Yet Mecca, which is supposedly more significant city according to the Islamic claims, and which the duration of it was far longer, and the region of Mecca had less rain, did not have any archaeological record. Now we come from a different angle and we ask the question, did archaeological data of other nations mention Mecca? And in particular, we are going to be looking at the Arabian archaeological records, because the Arabian archaeological records mentioned other Arabian cities and nations. Yet they do not mention Mecca. It's not enough that Mecca has no archaeological records before the 4th century AD, but no other Arabian records mention Mecca, despite the fact that they mention each other. First of all, we're going to look at the Eastern kingdoms. We're going to find that Mecca was absent from the Eastern kingdoms. Eastern kingdoms never heard of Mecca for 2,400 years of its supposed history of Mecca. The absence of Mecca from Yemeni inscriptions. This is very interesting because we will find that Dedan of northern Arabia and Qidar of northern Arabia and Yathrib of central Arabia were mentioned by the Yemeni inscriptions. We'll find also that Kinda was mentioned by Yemeni inscriptions, but Mecca was not mentioned by the Yemeni inscriptions. Ethiopian kingdoms such as Aksum and Habashat were mentioned also by the Yemeni inscriptions. The city of Yathrib was mentioned despite the fact that Mecca was closer to Yemen than Yathrib. And supposedly, according to the Islamic claim, Mecca was more important than Yathrib and more ancient, supposedly. Yet it was not mentioned at all by the Yemeni inscriptions. Now we come to the northern inscriptions. If you look at the northern inscriptions of northern Arabia, they mention the kings of Ma'in. They mention the Yemeni kingdoms, and you find them in Dedan inscriptions. Yet, despite the fact that Mecca was closer to Dedan than Yemen, we find no mention of Mecca whatsoever. This important information is significant because we are not simply stating that there was no archaeology for Mecca for 2,400 years. We're saying for the same period of time, none of the Arabian and none of the nations and cities around Mecca, whether we're talking about northern Arabia, southern Arabia, eastern Arabia, mention Mecca. This is Daniel Amari from the Religion Research Institute.